data is really the hardest thing to come by. I mean, it's a
That was going to be my next.
yeah. It's like
My next question.
I think listings are inefficient. That's another long story.
No, that's a story I want to hear.
Yeah.
But, okay.
And that was the first time I ever got like paid in my life, like outside of like a minimum wage line cook job. So I was like, oh, this is crazy.
There's no going back.
Yeah, I love mobile home parks now. Like, this is a great industry.
And we're back on the MHP Exchange Podcast. I'm your host, Frank Rizzo. Joining me is my partner in podcasts and communities and almost everything else, Eric Busuttil. How you doing today, Eric?
Doing good, Frank. Thanks.
All excited. Something a little different. We usually do this in the morning. Here, we're here this afternoon because we have a very special guest in studio with us, and we are super pleased to have. We have Armand Violi here. Armand is really burst on the scene over the last few years, became one of the high-profile brokers in the space with OtherStreet Brokers. He has MHP Value, a website out there that's really informative for community owners. That's I know I've been part of it, and he has a new book that just came out. So we're super pleased to have Armand here. Armand, how you doing today?
Yeah, good, man. I appreciate you guys inviting me on. Cool to be here.
It was actually very fortuitous because you happened to be in New York for the month, and we were able to kind of coordinate schedules. And how do you like being in New York? I know you've been here for almost a month.
It's
now.
a great time. The food, the ambience, everything's great. I'm glad that we were able to do this in person because I hate the Zoom podcasts. I think they're kind of boring visually, and you don't really. You don't get to know the person through a screen as much, so it's cool to actually be here in person.
Have you ever been to Staten Island before?
First time Staten Island.
All right.
Yeah.
Are you gonna try any pizza or anything?
Yeah. So after this, I was gonna ask you guys for some restaurant recommendations for dinner.
So just so you know, you're in the mobile home park capital of New York City.
Really?
Staten Island. There is one mobile home park. In all of New York City.
Nice.
It's in Staten Island.
Okay.
And that's why we based our headquarters here, right? That's why this show comes to you from Staten Island, because it is the one spot with a mobile home park in New York City.
Nice.
So Armand, we appreciate you being here, and start off for the people that aren't familiar with you, right? You had a pretty interesting route to get into commercial real estate, because before getting into commercial real estate, you were actually a MMA fighter.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Do you guys want me to start from the beginning, how I got into the mobile home park space, or?
Just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So born and raised in South Florida. I went to UCF for college. Had nothing to do with real estate. I thought I was going to become a lawyer one day, and then eventually stumbled across Grant Cardone on social media, like a lot of commercial real estate guys. And then, I thought best way to get into the industry is start brokering and being an agent on deals. And that eventually led to the mobile home park industry. And first deal was really lucrative. And then now $100 million worth of transactions later, here I am.
That was a quick snapshot. Of that's awesome. And how long have you been in this space?
3.5 years.
So from 0 to 100 million, that is exponential growth for anybody.
Yep.
So how does that happen, right? I know, you've talked about plenty of times that your first year into this, there was $10 million in sales, which is respectable.
Yeah.
But to go from 10 million to 100 million is a huge jump. And listen, most people can't get to 10. So how did that happen?
Yeah. So initially getting into the industry, so to give you a little bit of kind of my runway into it. So first commercial real estate brokerage I was with, and still with today, is OtherStreet Advisors. I did 6 months at the residential game, and that was basically a waste of time, made almost no money. So I started under a guy named Enon Winkler, who's I'd say he's a known guy in the industry. He owns probably 500-600 units himself. He's one of the first brokers in the mobile home park space. And then I coincidentally was his first hire, and he wasn't even really looking to hire people. I kind of just pitched him on a job like, hey man, I'm a young real estate guy. I'm willing to cold call and things like that. The first 10 million was done the same way that everyone in our industry finds deals. Essentially, you're buying cheap skip traced research lists online, or you just have a Reonomy account and you just one by one cold call dial, and there's no real system to it. And now if that works for people, because not everyone's trying to, let's say, broker 10 deals in a year. Most people are like, I'm looking to buy one investment. We're going to focus on that investment, then buy the next one. And then eventually maybe they might scale up, do 2, 3, 4, 5 deals a year. But so like the old school process of just cold calling and no real system works. And that was how I did it the first year. But the biggest thing that I noticed very quickly after having some success was eventually my database got large enough that the way I would stay in touch with everyone was I do a mix of quarterly calls, maybe call them once every 6 months, things like that. And I would have like a dashboard system that every time I call someone, then I go on my dashboard to follow up with them again. Eventually my dashboard got too big to where I couldn't physically stay in touch with as many people as possible. So instantly I saw there's an issue with just the typical cold call strategy because, I mean, when you think about it, like aside from the lack of scalability to where you can only call X amount of people in a day. It's a 1-to-1 ratio / form of contact. And it's great if you want to find a few deals. But to actually scale up to a rapid amount of source of deals, you have to do other things that are more scalable, such as text blast and email blast. And then the very first time I sent out a text blast to my database, I got over 20 responses of people telling me they sold their park. And now these are people that I called, spoke to. They told me they had an idea of selling, or they just flirted with the idea. Like we had a conversation about them selling, and 20 people over the course of a year and a half told me that they already sold their park. And if you think about 20 people, like average commission checks around $100,000. This is $2 million worth of commissions I gave up only because I was focused on calling. So basically this led to me looking into what I call 1 to infinite forms of contact, which will be like text blast and email blast, which is pretty standard. But now I'm testing a new thing with Facebook ads and retargeting with Facebook pixels. That's a whole nother long conversation. But just implementing something as simple as text blast and email blast, now instead of touching my database on a 1-to-1 ratio, aka I call each owner one by one every 3 months to 6 months, I can send a text blast to 5,000 owners every single month on top of email blast, the videos that I put out. And now it ramped up to where like I very quickly went from $10 million in transactions to a year to, even with the interest rates going bad, like I still did over $30 million on the high interest rate year. And then this year I just had a closing 2 weeks ago, and it's been a good year too. And this was technically a rough year compared to, the previous low interest rate time.
So, and I'm going to ask you this because I know a lot of people who do this.
Yeah.
How come you didn't go to the VA route? Right? A lot of people who I know in the space who have that same issue. I can only call so many people. I'll just hire a VA overseas. They'll make the calls for me while I'm out there, and they'll funnel out the really good leads or the really good, owners that are ready to go, and I'll speak to them. But my VA will make all my cold calls. How come you didn't go that route?
So let me break this down for the viewers, and this will go into answering your question. So the typical deal sourcing process in any type of real estate, it's outreach. Well, however much outreach you could do, the more outreach you could do, obviously the better. So the way people scale up is you buy research lists, or you pay for some type of researcher, it goes to a VA, and then the way you scale up your outreach and prospecting is getting more VAs who are going to make more calls for you. And that's scaling up at a still a 1-to-1 ratio. You're just basically paying for more man hours. It's an inefficient process. But when it comes to the research of commercial real estate, and this is where everyone gets it wrong, because they try and take residential processes and residential real estate processes into commercial real estate. But the one factor that separates out the residential from commercial is the factor of research. Now, residential real estate is usually owned by an individual. So let's say you pay a big skip trace list like Land Shark, Property Shark, Land Glide, any of these programs, they're going to pull, or Red X, they're going to pull up the owner of that property, and usually that's the person's, like the individual who owns it, and then you could get their phone number through skip trace, whatever program you use. Sure. Commercial real estate has an added component to where a company owns it, and usually there's multiple companies, and then you have to kind of go down the rabbit hole of finding who the actual owner and decision maker is. And that's not a simple process that could be automated yet, as far as I know. There's no program that does it very good. The problem with scaling with VAs, and why a lot of people will buy VAs, not get a lot of success, is one, you got the problem of just like English isn't their first language, or they're usually overseas, or just lack of training. But the biggest issue is you're not optimizing the data that you're getting to them. So imagine like you have all these calls being done, and you're like, oh, the VAs suck. They're not saying the right things on the phone. I'm not getting enough deal flow from it. Really, the problem most likely is you're just not getting good research for them. It's not that the VAs are an issue, and that's its own issue in itself. But even the process I use, it's internal data driven first. And then when your data is really rock solid and accurate, now you could start to implement other strategies like text blast and email blast. Because text blast and email blast, if you get a bunch of bounced emails or a bunch of disconnected text messages or undelivered, these programs will kick you off of it because there's anti-spam laws and things like that. So people who buy a crappy research list, which in the mobile home park industry, like data is really the hardest thing to come by. I mean, it's a
that was going to be my next.
Yeah, it's like
my next question.
Yeah, like multifamily, you got CoStar, and CoStar pays people to literally call the brokers and say who bought this, who sold this. They do that really well for multifamily, industrial, things like that. But the mobile home park industry,
it's very fragmented.
Very fragmented.
And just to be clear, that $100 million was primarily or all
MHP?
MHP?
Mobile home parks. Yeah,
all
it's
MHP.
like 113 million now.
Wow.
If you add up like this year's,
amazing.
And everything. But yeah, the biggest thing is the people seem to neglect how important the data is, and they're more focused on the cold call and one-to-one forms of contact, and that's just extremely inefficient. And let me use an example too, and just to ask you guys, like, how many times do you guys actually buy something like through a phone salesperson? And
I'm a phone sales. I grew up, learned the business on phone sales, and very rarely.
Yeah, so
I actually hired a phone salesperson that called me that he was really good. That was
yeah.
but I very rarely do I buy something from a phone.
Yeah. So I got and this was right before I came up with the whole MHP value idea, and now tying in like the branding into it. So like there's a whole big thing, and we can get into this later on, but the text blast, email blast, everything that's online based, it includes like you have to have a call to action for it, but what makes the call to action a credible call to action is by having branding behind it. And that's where there's videos, podcasts like you're doing now. Like a way to convert online sales is to have branding behind it, and that's like the missing key, and that's a whole other conversation. But the biggest thing was that stuck out.
There's two whole other conversations we're having here.
Yeah. But the biggest thing is that the text blast and email blast was a huge driver of it, but you can't really get into text blast, email blast, and one-to-infinite forms of contact, like I call it, without really good data on the front end. And that's the biggest issue with the VAs, is that how do you control the data that's going to the VAs?
So how have you overcome that challenge? Yeah. Right. So you clearly identified that's the challenge. How are you overcoming that?
You should be keeping your data internal. And what I mean is actually have your own internal researchers, have the highest paid programs. So right now, like just to do an order of command, and this is all in the free guide that you mentioned you download. So Reonomy.com is just a very quick way to get the property appraiser owner, whoever the owner entity is. But there's a website called IDIcore.com. It's actually IDIdata.com, but their program's called IDI Core. But that's the absolute #1 best program for direct cell phone numbers once you have the owner of a company. So you still got to do the things to find the owner of the company. But once you have the owner of the company, the very first best thing for finding the actual cell phone and direct contact info is IDIcore.com. And using those two programs, the best skip tracing programs that find the company owners and the actual cell phone numbers of owners, they track your IP address. So you can't give that login to like a VA in the Philippines and have them go research 1,000 things for you. So or else it flags your account. And then if you reach out and you try and get a skip trace list from someone that claims to use TLO, IDI, and all these programs, like if you go on Fiverr, there's a bunch of VAs that say they use those. If you buy their list and actually compare it, they're just using like Spokio or some crappy website. But keeping the research internal and actually verifying the data through cold calling is still a necessary evil, or not necessary evil. Like, it's a long process, but yeah, I would keep the research internal and focus on using high quality research, because having a number of calls doesn't matter if the calls are going to the wrong research. It's really about having quality research first and building an accurate database. And then once you have an accurate database, now you could use one-to-infinite forms of contact to reach exponentially more owners than someone who's just cold calling with VAs.
So you happen to find, and we've been on your list for a while, right? We've seen what you've been doing just from the email blast. I'm on your buy side list, and you do come up with some really unique deals, right?
Yeah.
Like they're not fully stabilized. There's still some, meat on the bone, so to speak. those kind of quasi off market deals. And that's your entire process of doing it, of maturing your relationship with the seller?
No, so my pipeline now is completely inbound text blasts, email blasts, and signups on my websites. I have completely, I don't cold call at all anymore. I have a big enough database that the text blast, email blast, and everything that I do just brings in more than enough deal flow now. Regarding the style of deals that I'm usually marketing, I don't really have a process for that at the moment, just because I have such a big enough database I compiled through random or one by one cold calling when I first started in the business, that once I started implementing marketing techniques now, it's completely inbound. But it's not necessarily something that I hunt and target. It's just whatever deals are coming through, I'm like, all right, seller expectations are reasonable. I could probably make good money with this. Those are the ones I choose to blast out.
Well, my question was going to be is how are you using that data? Like, you're actually doing like the reverse of most, right? So you're using the data and you're doing multiple, I guess, text message and email blast campaigns.
Yeah. So everything funnels to, so I break down deal sourcing to three main categories. So we have data, which is compiling data, building your CRM. Lead generation is what are your tactics for generating leads from it. Now, typically in the industry is cold calling, which still works. And that's what I still cold call to confirm the data and get it into the CRM, because the best way to verify if a phone number is correct, obviously, call them. And then along the way, you're still going to find deals that way. But the biggest thing is compiling the data, and you have a proper CRM that's all accurate. Like when I say, hey, I have the owner of this property in Laurinburg, I know for a fact that that's the owner of it. And I know the deal you guys actually just bought in Laurinburg, because I know Harold, one of the partners.
Okay.
So I actually was going to list that like 2.5, 3 years ago. And it's funny that I saw you guys bought that. I wanted to bring that up later. But
Did you turn that deal down? Or?
Yeah, I turned it down. I thought Laurinburg was too rough of a market at the time. And I know it's a wonky low lot rent deal, but I mean, all in North Carolina is so hot now. I was totally wrong at the time. Looking back, I'm like, definitely should have worked on it.
You know what? You look at deals at the time, and then over time, things start to look better, right? And you have that I-74 corridor, which is blowing up. And then they've got some new jobs that are coming into the area. And at the end of the day, in value, we looked at it as, wow, this was a great opportunity to deploy capital at a great value.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that's...
Yeah. Small world. But
small world.
To answer your question with the lead generation. So everything's a combination of text blasts and email blasts that to some extent provide value. Like I try and write well thought out articles myself. It's not like some ChatGPT generated article, but I try and provide some type of useful info to sellers or owners of mobile home parks that give them a reason to say this, and this, and that's why you should sign up for my free evaluation on my website. And the free evaluation is basically, okay, they're a seller, they send me their financials. The interesting thing about how I have the funnel set up now, and this plays into email automation and text automation, is if you sign up on my website for a free evaluation, you automatically get hit with an email that says what financials I need to see on your property. If you can't provide financials, here's a list of questions you could answer. And the craziest thing of how this morphed out was now I have text blasts and email blasts that go out. People click on my evaluation page, they sign up for an evaluation, they get hit with an automated email and text blast, and then they just respond to me with all their financials without me ever speaking to them.
That's incredible.
And that's where like my brain like ticked off. Like there was one deal.
So that was your aha moment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I always had this idea of like so you see this in wholesaling, and I know I'm getting long-winded, but giving you guys a story. So in wholesaling of residential houses, you see people like cash offer now, and people sign up on the website, right? A lot of people obviously don't want to call someone because they don't even, what cash offer now, what does that mean? I don't even know who you are. They don't want to talk to you on the phone, but they'll sign up on a website and like, try and get some info. So I was like, all right, well, I offer free evaluations as a broker. That's kind of the typical broker pitch. Let us evaluate your property and then eventually try and convert them to a listing or bring them an offer. So I'm like, all right, free evaluation. Let me try putting on a website sign up page. And then eventually I got like 6 or 7 people that signed up, and I'm like, all right, I'm tired of sending the same email asking them, I need your rent roll, P&Ls, yada, yada. So I set up an automation that automatically sends them that, and then it follows up after a week, and then after 3 weeks, and then after 3 months, and it's like a kind of an automated thing that goes on. And the very first person to automatically send me their financials without me ever speaking to them or anything was a guy with a 320 unit portfolio outside of Columbus, Ohio. Now, I ended up getting beat on it. I brought an offer at $19.5 million. The guy who ended up winning it, he was at like $21 million. I don't even know how he got to that number. But the craziest thing was the commission agreement I had on that was for $350,000, and I never spoke to the guy.
Wow.
So like that was when I was like, I thought this would work for like, mom and pops that have like a 30 unit community. They don't know what they want to do with it, like the desperate kind of old lady story. But this was like a sophisticated guy who signed up through my website from text blast and email blast, sent me all of his financials, rent rolls, P&Ls, like very detailed stuff, and called me after that, like all without speaking to him. And that was like
I think the consumer, because we talk about consumer experience, the consumer is getting used to everything being online, right?
Yeah.
They're buying a car online, they're shopping for food online, they're doing all these things online that they've never done before.
Yeah.
So this is the natural progression,
Yeah.
and it saves a lot of the, you get a sophisticated seller who's tech savvy or comfortable with it, realizes, hey, this information is going to be needed. If I give it to you, you're going to get me a real offer. If not, then I don't have to waste time with a conversation.
And timing has a lot to do with that as well, right?
Sure.
And when you're getting a call, there's that pressure always, right? So, you're sending these, texts and email blasts out, however much you're sending them, but there's no pressure of them getting to you. So they're kind of doing it at their own pace, and that feeling gives of
them having control.
Exactly.
Right? They have the control on that. That's a great point.
And it does a kind of a double thing too, where you're not coming to them from a desperate point of view. When you cold call someone, even if you're great on the phone. So when you're great on the phones, you make it sound like you're not desperate for their business. But ultimately, you're cold calling because you don't have marketing budget, or maybe you're not known in the industry, so you're just putting in the sweat equity to go find some deals.
Sure.
And that's a useful way to do it. But what's interesting is that my conversion rate of getting financials to getting actual listings, and now I'm actually switching this year. I want to get away from listings. I actually went over the top on listings, and now I think listings are inefficient. That's another long story.
No, that's a story I want to hear.
Yeah.
But, okay.
But what was interesting is that now I'm not desperately begging a seller to send me info. Instead, I'm providing them value through either educational content or market updates. And then when it's convenient for them, they're thinking, who's the guy who hasn't been bothering me, begging me for financials, sending me unsolicited offers, pissing me off all the time? Who's the guy that's just been, trying to help me out? Here's what your park is worth. Here's recent trades in the area. Here's what's going on with interest rates at the market. I kind of like that guy. Then they send me financials, and when they call me, it's a totally different dynamic where I don't need to try and persuade them to want to work with me. They reached out to me because they want to work with me. Sure. So the conversion rate to actually converting from financials to a listing, it's like when I present now, it's like a 90% chance I'm getting a listing.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah,
good for you.
And Frank, I just want to back up a little bit. I know you mentioned, that was an aha moment on how he was going to go about marketing. But, to go from doing what you did straight into MHP, that's also a unique conversation. Typically, it's somebody who was in commercial real estate and went into MHP. The gentleman you started working with, did he, Mr.
Enon Winkler.
Was he in MHP or he was in commercial?
He was commercial. He was a top producer, Marcus Millichap guy from like the 90s, 2000s for multifamily, like big nationwide multifamily. And then him and, don't quote me on the story, I'm kind of paraphrasing it, but him and Mike Conlon ended up partnering on like a mobile home park or two, just randomly. And this is before mobile home parks were a thing. Like I'm talking early 2000s. They ended up making a ton of money, and then he ended up buying a bunch of mobile home parks and now brokering a lot of them. And he broke off and he started OtherStreet Advisors. He hired one guy. They had a falling out from what I heard. And then I was like the first hire after that. So it was basically just me and Enon at the time. And he wanted to grow the mobile home park industry. And I was just the young guy wanting to get in real estate. Let me try and make some money.
I always love hearing this story.
Yeah. And then I was cold calling residential, so I wasn't scared of cold calling, but I didn't have any guidance at the time on how to do it.
This guy is not scared of talking. That's so
So he, basically he showed me how to get into business. And then, the very first deal I did, so I joined him around December, January. And then the first deal ever was actually one in Asheville, North Carolina. It was about an 80-unit deal. It was $4.85 million was the ultimate sale price of it. But that one started with a seller telling me to F off. I hate brokers. I don't want to work with you. You guys are all scam artists. I'm like, oh, great. What do I do here? And he's like, well, I got an idea.
Call him again.
Yeah, call him again. Yeah. So, but we ended up calling a buyer, and the buyer agreed to pay us 2% on it. And he's like, I'll just give me the guy's phone number, give me whatever info you got. I'll take care of it. Calls us like a month later. He's like, hey guys, I'm under contract. Just want to let you know, just because I'm not going to go around you guys, whatever. And then fast forward to October, he calls us, deal closed, sends us the check. And then if you do the math, 2% of 4.8 million, made almost $100,000 with one phone call. And that was the first time I ever got paid in my life, outside of a minimum wage line cook job. So I was like, oh, this is crazy.
There's no going back.
Yeah, I love mobile home parks now. This is a great industry. So
now we talked about it a little bit. You just put out this book, the CRE Accelerator, right? So why don't you tell us a little bit about that book? Because you have a lot of great information in there, some of which you talked about today, but just tell us about that book and what was your thought process in putting that out there the way you did, and how people can find it.
Yeah, so I have a website and a coaching program called CRE Deal Accelerator. It's not mobile home park focused, it's marketing focused for commercial real estate. But in that book, in that program, I essentially break down the exact step-by-step process of how I transitioned from 100% outbound cold calling and the traditional way of finding deals, which, like I mentioned earlier, you're just shotgun cold calling, sloppy CRM, buying crappy paid research lists, and how to transition from that into actually building a proper CRM and then marketing through internet funnels. By internet funnels, text blasts, email blasts, now a combination of Facebook ads that route to a landing page to where you could capture the info, and now you have a seller. I started it kind of as a way to... One, I don't know if it's ever going to become profitable, but I heard Pace Morby, who's popular real estate guy online. He talked about that he has his coaching programs, and he teaches people how to do creative finance deals. And what ended up happening from teaching people how to do creative finance deals, they actually ended up becoming his deal flow for his business. So now all of his deals come from his private group / course teaching students. So I was thinking, all right, let me teach a bunch of guys and maybe make some money along the way on how to actually effectively source deals. I could help a lot of young guys get into the industry, because a lot of young guys reach out to me for my vlogs and stuff I do on YouTube. And then from that, maybe that turns into a whole different revenue stream where we all have a ton of deal flow that we could kind of take over the market or take over some type of market share in whatever we're working on. So that was kind of my thoughts behind it.
Great. And so far, like I said, the information there is fantastic.
Thank you.
It's really informative. Have you got, what has been the response so far from that?
Yeah, so we actually have our first student who he has a deal under contract in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and it's set to close in probably, I think, around 3 weeks, and he's going to make, I think, $52,000 off it, to be exact.
Wow.
For his take on the spread. So
wow.
Yeah. Now that was crazy. So one guy actually, no mobile home park experience or anything. He was a residential guy. Read the book, loved it, joined the course right away. He's the first guy to pay me. So he's like, I want private coaching from the webinars I was doing. And I was doing it with this guy, Derek Vickers, and he's more on the raising money and how to raise money and structure like a syndication if you're going to go buy mobile home parks. And I'm on the deal sourcing side. This guy loved it. He took action right away, bought all the research tools first week, found a bunch of deals right off the bat, one of them under contract. And it's crazy that before I even had the actual coaching program course set up, he's already gotten a deal under contract and buyer and should be closing soon. So it's kind of crazy.
That's not only, that's incredible.
Yeah.
And congratulations to him and congratulations to you.
Yeah, thank you.
For coaching him through, because listen, part of what we're doing here, it's not just about making money for ourselves. It's the impact that you're having on people's lives, whether it's a stakeholder, an investor, somebody you're coaching, or resident. That's what's so impactful about what we do here in this space.
Yeah, thank you. So question for you guys. Sure. With talking so much about media and I'm fully sold on social media, and I think not social media in a sense of all right, let's go post a cool Instagram picture, but I think doing long format content or some type of online content is how you eventually capture the interest and translate it into either business or whatever the end goal is. With you guys creating the MHP Exchange in this podcast, what's kind of the goal? Are you trying to raise retail money from this, or are you eventually going to have kind of like a coaching platform yourself, or what's kind of the social media goal with doing the podcast?
So that's a great question, and you're actually the first guest to ask us a question like that.
Yeah.
So part of it was it's multifaceted. We had been in the space for 7-8 years that we have been putting in the work, and we built our business organically. So we have a group of people who've partnered and backed us from day one. And that grew from 5 people to 95 people, all off word of mouth, all off referral. So, and we did no social media marketing, posting about anything that we did. And it got to a point where if we said we wanted, first of all, for us to tell the story to our people, right? It's easy when you have 5 people or 10 people to call them up regularly to say, hey, we're down on site. This is what's going on.
Yep.
This is what we're doing. But all of a sudden you get to a point where you can't touch all your people all the time.
Yep.
And so now you need a platform where, hey, this is what we're doing. This is what you're part of. And we just want to make sure that you're involved. Right. So that's one thing that was really most important for us. Secondly, we looked at what's happened over the last 36 months, where there's a tremendous amount of people who entered the space or had questions about the space or will contact us about wanting to get in the space. We said, well, what's the best way we can reach them, right? And if we can create a platform where we could bring on, industry, insight from people in the space, whether it's a community owner, whether it's a vendor, whether it's a broker, to kind of give that insight, and that could be helpful, that would help either people who want to become investors in the space or people who are community owners and maybe they got in because they thought it was easy, right? Or they thought that, hey, I had a captured audience and, I could make some money real quickly. And then they find out that's not really how the space operates. You really have to be vested in there with your resident, understand the community, understand the dynamics. And this became a platform for us to kind of have that outreach for either community owners who were having some challenges or people who wanted to get into the space and had some questions. And if we can help answer those questions and put people on a path to financial freedom like it's helped us, then we'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool.
Where do you think you kind of alluded to it because you got in at a very interesting time, very low interest rate environments. We've seen rates spike up. They've kind of settled out.
Yeah, it feels stable. There feels like positivity in the market right now. But
well, that's what I'm going to ask you.
Yeah.
Where do you see the market going over the next 12 months?
I have 2 theories. One, right now it seems the talk is, all right, rates are going to stay the same or at least come down a little bit until election time. I don't know if that's politically motivated. I'm not like an economist. I'm hesitant about just the overall commercial real estate industry, mobile home park values, and just values in general, because if you look at historical graphs, for example, every 10 years, give or take, there's some type of recession or some type of correction. We really didn't go through any major correction through COVID. If anything, I mean, values skyrocketed up after COVID. So part of me is like, all right, we're on like this 12-year bull run from 2011 bottoming out to now. Is it still going to trend upward? I don't think so. But, as a broker, we just react to whatever the interest rates are and what people are willing to pay. So it's kind of irrelevant to me just because I'm not on the actual operation side of things. But I would imagine something's got to give soon, just when you look at it on a time basis. What's your guys' thoughts on the market, or how are you kind of seeing things?
Well, I happen to agree with you. I think that rates are going to continue to come down a little bit, right? And that's going to affect, all real estate markets. I think what's interesting in this space, well, I guess you could talk about any real estate space right now. It's more expensive to build than to buy, right? So I think that's a big issue, right? And I think sooner or later these prices are going to probably tick up even further, in my opinion. I don't think I think Frank is this is something he may agree with me on.
We have this ongoing debate back and forth. I'm a little bit more cautious about where we are in the marketplace. I think that you have $1.4 trillion of mortgages that have to be reset, commercial mortgages that have to be reset over the next 24 months. If you weren't able to perform at a 4.5% interest rate, even if it's at 7 or 6.5, you're not going to perform at 6.5, 7. And so you're going to have sellers you're going to have owners who are going to have to make some tough decisions, whether I'm going to have to buy in and recast my loan by buying into a refinance, or am I going to sit there and have to look for an exit? And just because I might have to make a tough decision because I went on a buying spree and maybe a couple of my assets aren't performing. And so I have to make up that difference somehow. And additionally, I think in some markets, the rent increases far exceeded where the income increases were. And I think there's got to be some pushback because and you're starting to see it now because even in multifamily rents, the rents are starting to compress a little bit. Yep. I just don't think if you were underwriting to a double-digit rent increase every year,
yep.
you're going. There's some challenges there. Yep. So I think you have to be. I think this is going to be an operator's market. I think if you've got slim operations, if you know how to go in there and precision, look at your income statement, see where you can cut while still driving inefficiencies to those communities, you'll be okay. But I think the next 12 months or 18 months will be interesting to say the least.
Yeah.
And I think you're starting to see some sellers come to that realization. Like the market's starting to pick up a little bit of pace because there was that divergence between the bid and the ask over the last 12 months.
I do think that the markets that we're in, the Southeast, it's going to continue to be a healthier environment than the bigger cities. New York and New Jersey is probably the worst performing markets right now in the country. But I ultimately think that, I don't know, Frank. I would say I happen to disagree with you that we're going to see a big tumble in prices. I think you're going to see, prices because what Frank is talking about is the income approach value of these properties. And yes, these numbers don't make sense, but there's still money out there. And I happen to believe that these prices aren't going to tank. I don't think they're going to tank, Frank.
Well, it's all going to be sector specific too. Like, let's use you guys as an example. You're probably buying underperforming mobile home park assets that need a good manager to come in that have well below market rents and deferred maintenance. So, let's say when you guys bought when it was low interest rates, when you're looking at where the future value is going to be, can we refi in 3 to 5 years? Like you guys probably had a really big spread in there. Meanwhile, maybe that B-class multifamily syndicator that just got into business at that time who bought thinking he's going to do crazy double-digit rent increases.
And I think you're going to see a lot of those investors and new entrances into the space put their properties back on the market.
But that's the challenge, right?
Yeah.
When that operator has to sell because his loan has come due or what we've seen, and we've had a number of investors that have told us through the other syndications that they're involved with that they had capital calls, right? Yep. And they need to raise money. And so they can't raise money in this environment or they're finding it challenging to raise money. And they have to sell that creates pressure on prices all across the board, right? Because that just resets value, right? And that's where I think we're heading into because you saw in the last quarter of last year of 2023 that the capital calls start to increase. Yeah. And I think that's just something that has to be monitored. And I think because if you go back in time, the real big rush of commercial refinance was the fourth quarter of 2020. Yep. So now they're starting to come due. And that's where I think you just have to look at those macro trends.
So how are you guys doing with buying? Are you guys full steam ahead?
We have been very disciplined. We kept our buy box while the market was getting hefty. And I think we've had this conversation. We kind of lightened up, and we looked at it as reshuffling the deck. Yep. As the valuations got higher. We're looking right now. We're opportunistically looking right now. If it's in our geographic region, if it hits the numbers and the metrics that we're looking for, we'll be very aggressive. I think, and we've talked about it. We're in the Jacksonville, North Carolina market. We just locked in another off-market opportunity there. We're super excited about. We're going to be talking more about in future episodes. 47 units, 47 lots, 35 homes. Nice. Real value add opportunity. Multi-generational property gives us an opportunity to go in there, add some value in a very strong, MSA. but if we find the right opportunity, we have, we're aggressively looking. If it's inside our buy box, we're super aggressive. But this is a market where we won't stretch, right? I'm not gonna project for perfection. I'm gonna project that, hey, we're gonna
more conservative infill assumptions.
And it's getting harder and harder to make the numbers work because the cost of everything, right? Labor is gotten more expensive. The cost of goods has gotten more expensive, and we're buying those properties that are, they need a big heavy lift where we're going to be putting a lot of money into, bringing in new homes, new infrastructure, redoing the park. And because that cost has gone up so much, it's become more difficult to find new opportunities. But we also believe that you're going to see other groups or people that have entered the space exit the space over the next few years. And I think that's where we'll find their opportunity.
Yeah, I'm curious about a lot of because especially in the MH industry, I feel like there's a lot of different, I'd say younger groups that were very bullish buying up a lot of parks because they can get it for cheap prices per pad, but they probably neglected operations in their big buying frenzies, and then now they're paying for that.
And they were also able to buy with cheap money.
Yeah.
Right.
And I was just speaking to an executive at one of those, private family offices. They bought over 100 units. I'm not mentioning any names, over 100 communities in the past 3 years. Yeah. And they just told me that they bought it for a couple of reasons. One, they had the accelerated depreciation and they needed a tax shelter. And then two, they just thought it was like, well, I have a sticky resident. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. And we should, this is not a business you could run from a spreadsheet. Right? You have to understand the nature and the emotional attachment that residents have of that community. And you can't just go in there, offer no value, right?
Yeah. And then just hike the rents up.
Let's hike the rent. And so they've gotten rid of their entire operation staff and they're hiring brand new operation staff. Like right now, they're undergoing a big shift. Now they have money and they're going to do it. And listening to them, and I'm listening to what they're going to spend, it's like the numbers don't make sense, right? Like they're not going in there precision. They're just going to, spend all this money and hope that they get a return over time. And listen, some people have the pockets where they can do it, and then some people don't, and they're going to have to make those decisions. So, and I think that's what's going to make this space so interesting over the next 12 to 18 months, because we had so many new entrants, and you're going to see who stays and who figures it out and who decides that they're going to play a different game, right? And that's what makes this space so interesting, and that's why we're having this information out there, I think, is so important.
Definitely. And how are you guys finding most of your deal flow? Is it mostly through brokers and other bird dogs, or do you guys have your own kind of cold call teams, or how are you guys finding most of your deal flow?
I think it's kind of a combination. We have some brokers that we deal with, right? That'll send us some deals. We have some local bird dogs in different regions that'll send us some deals. And then internally, we have people who are, on Reonomy, making calls right from there, trying to find owners who are ready to make a move. And this way we can mature, that process with them and create a relationship with them. And then one of the things that we tend to do, and we found a couple of deals this way, when we get into a market, we find that it's super important to let all the other community owners know who you are, right? So we've got that deal, we bought a deal we're in Troy, Alabama. We had another deal on the other side of town become available. And because we knew the collateral already, we could, and the seller and the owner had to move quickly. We could move fast where other people didn't know the market, didn't know the asset, and we could close a 280 unit park in 45 days, where most people would have been doing that in diligence, and the owner had to move quick, and we were able to do that because we make sure that we're in their market. We want to know everybody who's around, and I think that's real estate 101, right? But I think a lot of people overlook that.
You guys using text blasts, email blasts, and things like that, or
not yet? But I'm gonna take a look at your course, and we're gonna.
No, off camera, I'd be happy to give you guys advice and stuff, because an interesting thing that plays into it. And it's interesting you guys are doing this podcast, but what I was talking about earlier with text blasts, email blasts, or just any type of marketing, it's the branding behind it gives the credibility for them to actually engage and respond with it. And so, like, people going into my course or asking me questions off of the book, what I explained, one, you'll get more success from just sending out text blasts and email blasts on top of calls, because obviously if you're calling them every now and then, and you're hitting them with a text and an email. Obviously, you'll get more success just for that. But the exponential growth process comes from the branding behind it, and most people aren't willing to get in front of a camera, which you guys are doing now. So, example, if you guys send a text to like a mobile home park owner or someone, they might remember you, they might not when you're calling them, but if you're sending them a text with your new podcast that just came out, your new closing, a video tour of one of your parks and the big turnaround you did of this community, and you're giving them a call every quarter.
It adds validation.
Yeah.
It's like third-party verification because you're on a different platform.
Yeah, so like someone in your position would be able to actually implement like the online funnel, I like to call it, way more effective than someone who doesn't do the branding behind it. So it's cool to see you guys doing the podcast and everything. Appreciate
that. Yeah. And we appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So Armand, just again, for anybody listening, where could somebody reach out to you if they have any questions? Where should they go to download your book? Where should they go to, if they want to get a value on their mobile home park, where should they go?
Yeah, so I got two things. MHPValley.com is the main marketing platform for my real estate brokerage. So if you guys are interested in having me underwrite, evaluate, or get your mobile home park in front of buyers like Frank, MHPValley.com is the best way to get a hold of me. If you have any questions about commercial real estate deal sourcing, you could find me either at Instagram at Armand Violi or on CREDealaccelerator.com. And over there, you could download my free guide. It's 100% free. There's no upsells. It's the exact step-by-step process with all of the tools and everything I've used to sell over $100 million in commercial real estate in less than 3 years, and given away completely for free. So if you guys want that, it might not be free for that much longer. So yeah, go there to download it.
So I have one last question, right, before we let you go. What was harder for you, MMA or the MHP commercial brokerage business?
MMA all day. MHP, surprisingly, brokering commercial real estate is surprisingly easy if you look like versus the money you could make with it. Like what I was talking about, the first deal ever I literally made 2 phone calls.
Got it.
And next thing you know, 6 months later, a big check. That doesn't happen in MMA. So I'll give it to the mobile home parks for ease. But it's tough out there. You gotta hunt deals and make a lot of calls. But
guys making it look easy out here.
No.
Well, listen, that's a great story. Unbelievable accomplishments in such a short period of time. I love hearing about how others have found the space and love the space as much as we do. And, great story. Really appreciate you coming out to us in Staten Island, the mobile home capital of New York City.
There you go.
Hope to have you back, and hope we can do some business together soon.
Yeah, no, definitely. And we'll definitely get a deal done soon or something. We overlapped a ton, man. Like
I think we missed out on a couple just back and forth. But offline, we'll have a conversation.
Yeah.
But we definitely have to get a deal done in 2024 together.
Definitely.
So looking forward to it.
Yeah, and you guys are right in my kind of wheelhouse with the south to eastern North Carolina. That's right there. So
perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you for inviting me on.
Thank you for being on, and we appreciate you listening. If you have any questions, you want more information, send us a DM or click the link below. We'll be happy to answer your questions and bring you more impact from people in the space next time on the MHP Exchange. Thank you very much.